By the Celestials, Maldraxxus is amazing. Oh, it's so cool. Oh, Ben, look at that skull. Oh, and that skull. Ben. Look at that really cool skull. Isn't it so cool?
Yes, Box. Maldraxxus is extremely cool.
Ah, yes. I too love the Maldraxxus. It is much cool. I like the bones. I must go now. I've got to see the eye doctor. My teeth are bad. Okay, bye.
Well, that was suspicious.
How so? I go to the eye doctor for my teeth all the time.
Shut up, Box.
I'm sorry, Bannerack.
Come on, let's follow him.
Oh, come on, my fairy friends. Let's have a tea party. You guys are so much better than those edgelords and Maldraxxus. Hee, I love you guys. Hee hee.
What the hell am I watching?
I was a pessimist about Shadowlands. I was excited, but deep down I thought Shadowlands would be a failure. I thought it would be fun for a month or two and then would fall off thanks to poor design choices. Never in my history of playing WoW have I ever felt like this before. Even after Warlords of Draenor, I couldn't contain my excitement for Legion. I had lost any faith I had in Blizzard after the debacle that was Battle for Azeroth, where Blizzard doubled down on bad choice after bad choice, culminating in the corruption system, introduced in patch 8.3, which is easily the worst gearing system ever introduced into World of Warcraft. I stopped making discussion videos about the game because it just got too depressing. BFA had its redeeming qualities, and all in all I'm glad I played through it to the end, but it failed to reach the same heights as its predecessor Legion. Why am I starting out a video with this? Well, to show you that I wasn't willing to blindly get behind Shadowlands. Shadowlands had a lot to prove in order to win me over, and over the past couple days, it has. I still have some concerns, but I am far more optimistic than I was a few days ago. Over the past couple days, we've gotten news drop after news drop about Shadowlands. I was in the middle of writing a video about why I was worried about Shadowlands, and I had to scrap it completely. They went through and systematically debunked every point I wrote in that video. On top of that, I've started writing the script at least 3 times before something new came out and caused me to need to start all over again. We've gotten details on class changes, covenant abilities, a developer blog post, data mining, and so much more. In this video, I want to explain how I went from being dead set against Shadowlands to being extremely excited for it, with only a few concerns remaining. Let's start out by addressing the fact that Shadowlands had already gotten off to a very good start with what was announced at BlizzCon. We found out that there would be no artifact power grind going into Shadowlands, the Mythic Plus cache would now let you choose between many different options, and the game was going to be taking a much more alt-friendly approach. The Tower of Torghast seemed like an awesome feature, and I especially appreciated the lack of a time limit. The art and theme were outstanding, classes were going to be unpruned, and there was going to be a massive focus on player expression as well as player agency. There was so much good stuff that I'm sure I'm forgetting some of it right now. But even still, it wasn't enough to convince me that Blizzard would truly be able to pull it off. While none of this was able to sway me, these are all awesome things that gave me a lot of hope for Shadowlands. All these things indicated that Blizzard was willing to listen and was moving towards giving the players more choice, not only in terms of cosmetics, but in terms of power. On April 6th, Blizzard started by posting a developer update for Shadowlands. I wasn't expecting much out of this, if I'm being honest. I was expecting them to announce Alpha was coming, and that was about it. But we got so much more than that. The first thing that instantly jumped out to me was that the Tower of Torghast was going to be coming into the game in the alpha, and within a month no less. This already marks a massive change in direction from the testing phase of BFA. Torghast is one of the most important core features of Shadowlands, and it is imperative that Blizzard gets it right. That is why it's so encouraging to see it coming onto the alpha so early. Some of you might remember that in BFA's testing cycle, we didn't get to test a lot of core features until beta, and stuff like Azerite armor wasn't able to be fully tested for ages. This marks a change in the way they are testing the expansion. Given that a horrendous testing cycle was one of the biggest issues with BFA, it is awesome to see them being more eager to get core features into the testers' hands. That's great news, but read on a little bit further down and you'll find something even more exciting. Template characters. Okay, I might need to explain why that's exciting. Template characters are characters that are able to be created at max level in order to test in-game systems of the expansion, something that was sorely lacking from the BFA Alpha and Beta. This not only means that testing will be less annoying for anyone in the Alpha and Beta, it also shows Blizzard's focus on testing in-game content. In the BFA Beta and Alpha, you couldn't test characters out at 120 unless you went through the leveling experience. Now, you'll be able to test out any class you want at level 60, which is simply an amazing change that means Blizzard will be able to get better feedback faster, which will ultimately result in a better end product. Let's talk about the fact that this developer update exists at all. One of the worst things about the BFA testing cycle is that nothing was clear or explained. Blizzard would make changes and not give us any information. Their communication was atrocious, and we are already seeing that change based off this developer update alone, not even including all the communication we've seen since. In this update, they even say, unlike the past couple expansion alphas where the conversation with the community often began with us saying, "Let us know what spells you miss most," this time around, we're eager to hear whether we've gone too far with unpruning. Maybe a bunch of folks actually really hated Eyes of the Beast all along. Who knows? End quote. They are talking to players and they are actively seeking feedback. It's another matter if they'll actually take action on that feedback, but it's a good indicator that they care what the players think and are genuinely listening to feedback. In fact, most of the changes that have been announced in Shadowlands seem to be a direct response to feedback, including one small, tiny little change that was announced in this developer update. I feel a little silly bringing this point up because this is something the community just doesn't really care about. It's just a small, tiny fact that PvP vendors are back. This is massive. PvP vendors being back is great, of course, but this change isn't just great because of what it does. What is more important is what it signals. The PvP vendor debate is something that Blizzard has been very bullheaded about ever since they removed them a couple years back. Ever since their removal, the player base has been crying out for their return, even people like me who don't PvP very often. Vendors were just a far superior system, and the system we got in BFA was messy, convoluted, and took away player agency. For years, Blizzard remained stubborn and prideful, defending the change with such nonsensical reasons like, vendors are too hard to find, and would follow that kind of statement up by adding an Azerite vendor to the game. It was nonsense, and there was no reason to remove them, but rather than accepting that, Blizzard kept trying to fix something that wasn't broken and refusing to admit it wasn't broken in the first place. This change signals that they are now willing to listen and change in a way that they weren't before. This gives me hope because if we manage to change their mind about the AP grind, Mythic Plus cash rewards, and PvP vendors, maybe there's a chance we can get them to listen about corruption, Titan forging, and other convoluted RNG systems. This is a quick little edit from the future. There is no convoluted RNG system in Shadowlands, and it's been confirmed that the dev team is looking at bringing tier sets back. This is just amazing. All this was announced after I wrote this script. I'll be talking about it all later in the video. Anyway, back to the regular script. This change shows us that Blizzard is okay with admitting they were wrong and making changes for the better, which can only be a good thing for Shadowlands. And that's all we got in day one. All in all, these are some awesome things. But was it enough for me? No, I still wasn't on board with Shadowlands. I was closer, but I wasn't there yet. One of the biggest concerns I had was with Covenant abilities, and that was what got addressed on April 7th. On April 7th, Blizzard released an article going over Covenant class and signature abilities. I went into this one ready to hate it. I was with a large section of the community and thinking that player power shouldn't be tied to Covenants at all. After reading through all the abilities, I found myself very conflicted. Let me explain. World of Warcraft is an MMORPG, and over the course of the past few years, the game definitely felt like an MMO, but not so much like an RPG. Legion had some awesome stuff with the class order halls, but BFA didn't really have many strong RPG elements. In their current state, oh, this is gonna get me a lot of hate. In their current state, Covenants are an awesome RPG mechanic. I'll get to the negatives, but let me talk about the positives first. I was expecting these abilities to be on the boring side, just like Azerite armor, and they are anything but. From an ability that casts multiple Avengers shields to nearby targets, to an ability that causes druids to cast 16 druid spells over 4 seconds, there are a lot of really cool and interesting abilities here. But more importantly, these abilities seem like fun. After reading through this list, I wanted to get on the alpha and go play with each and every one of them. Also after reading this, I got what Blizzard was going for. These abilities are supposed to make you feel unique and powerful, and in their current state, they seem like they will do that. This system means that what Covenant you choose matters from the way you look to the way you play, and it is a choice that will impact you all expansion. And well, that's a good thing in a way, because a good RPG has meaningful and lasting choices, and this choice is nothing if not meaningful and lastful. So what is the downside? The big one being discussed at the moment is that players will have to pick a covenant they don't like in order to do good DPS, that they will be forced into a covenant they don't like in order to remain competitive. And there is truth to that for world first raiders, but beyond that it simply isn't true. The truth is that the 99% of players who don't mythic raid extremely hardcore will be able to make do with whatever ability they have, and this won't impact them at all unless they just hate the ability they are given. That won't stop a large number of people from complaining that they are being pigeonholed into something when they aren't at all. But anyway, I get that people don't want to do less DPS because of their covenant, but the extent to which this will matter is being greatly exaggerated. The choice here is very compelling from an RPG perspective and could be an awesome RPG experience for 99% of the player base. But from a competitive esports world first perspective, it sucks because of how restrictive the system will be, and because it creates an uneven playing field. And there are no solutions that I can think of that maintain that strong RPG choice while fixing the hardcore problem. So you either sacrifice the level playing field or you sacrifice the RPG. Basically, you appease the 99% or the 1%. And after thinking about this a lot, I think the game should be designed around the 99%, not the 1%. And for the majority of players, this will be a fun and compelling choice. So in my mind, the whole argument of, you might have to choose a covenant you don't like, doesn't hold water because it simply isn't true for 99% of the player base, and the other 1% is choosing to play the game that way. What concerns me more is what if a player loves the look of Ravendreth, but they hate their class ability, and being forced to use it ruins their class for them. That's something I'm far more concerned about, as it is a legitimate concern for every player in the game. Like I said, there's no elegant solution to this problem. No matter what Blizzard does, someone is going to lose, and in all honesty, I think the way they have it set up now is the best possible solution, while still being an imperfect solution. I think a strong RPG element is more valuable to the game as a whole than a system that lets you choose any ability you want and dilutes the RPG side of the game even further. Also, it's just more boring to be able to swap between all abilities, whereas it's more interesting if you have to make a choice. On the other hand, I do get that people don't want to feel like they're being punished for picking a certain covenant. I just think that, like with a lot of issues WoW faces, the issue is largely perception rather than the issue itself. What I mean by that is, let's say there's a heroic raid leader that sees Method's roster are all part of Bastion, so he decides to force all his raiders to reroll to Bastion. The issue in this situation isn't the covenant abilities, it's the stupid raid leader. And the way that he perceived the situation, as getting through heroic absolutely won't require any specific covenant abilities. Another example is legendaries and Legion. They were unbalanced and annoying to get, but because they were so rare, it gave them a certain majesty, and it was a strong RPG mechanic. Once they were put on the vendor, and you could get your best in slot ones right away, that majesty was lost. And I think in light of BFA, it's pretty clear that legendaries and their implementation were a large part of why Legion worked so well, in spite of its flaws. And I feel similarly about the covenant abilities. Believe me, this is not what I thought I would be writing about covenant abilities. It would be easier for me, and I would get more fans if I just bitched about it rather than going through the pros and the cons. I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this, and that is fine. I am happy to have discussions in the comments. Moving on past that extremely divisive subject, let's talk about the article that was released on April 8th, the class design article. This article goes over many of the class changes that are going to be coming in Shadowlands, and this was my breaking point. This was when I gave into the Shadowlands hype. Class design was one of my biggest fears going into Shadowlands, as they said they would be unpruning, but they said nothing about overarching class changes. This was very concerning to me because the baseline of most specs presently feels extremely underwhelming, and as great as unpruning is, it was never going to fix that. What they revealed with the class changes article is that they weren't just doing unpruning. They were revamping the way that a lot of classes would work, not from the ground up, but substantial enough to make a massive difference. Some of the highlights of this being two-handed frost DKs returning, Maelstrom being removed for shamans, unstable affliction no longer stacking, summon gargoyle being made available to all DK's baseline. The removal of Maelstrom is particularly exciting for me because it reintroduces a playstyle that had disappeared from the game entirely. In the current state of the game, classes feel far too similar. All you need to do is look at competitors like Star Wars The Old Republic or Final Fantasy to see what variety in class design looks like. And it's something WoW is sorely lacking. Most classes are builders-spenders, and the removal of Maelstrom makes the Shaman a much more cooldown-oriented class as opposed to a builder-spender. Different and diverse playstyles is something the game is in desperate need of, and I am so excited that we are finally seeing it happen. I could go on and on about all the good changes they made, but I think you get the idea. These class changes are what people have been begging for years, and we are finally getting them, and it is glorious. One of the biggest issues with BFA was that classes just didn't feel like they had much depth, and the core gameplay was boring. And as you can imagine, that is a really bad thing. Now, going into Shadowlands with huge class changes, new Covenant abilities, and new Covenant class abilities, classes are shaping up to be in a pretty good spot, which is something I am beyond happy to say. So after finishing the script for this video, Ian decided to do a stream with Sloot wherein he announced that Titan Forging and all systems like it will be gone, and that tier sets will most likely be coming back. I'm at a loss for words. I never thought this day would come. My biggest fear about Shadowlands is that the new gearing system would be another horrible RNG-ridden system, and now to find out that there won't be any replacement systems at all, it's amazing. This expansion seems to be everything I ever wanted, and so much more, and at this point, I am more hyped for Shadowlands than I've ever been for any other expansion previously. This is just amazing. First, we got a ton of good news at BlizzCon. After that, we saw the devs' willingness to communicate, to take feedback, and improve their testing process through the developer update. Then we saw tons of new fun abilities that are legitimately exciting through the Covenant system. And finally, we saw that class design is finally moving in the right direction, with tons of amazing changes that have already been made through the class design update. Also, all this new data mining stuff coming out looks amazing. Tier sets are coming back, and no more Titan Forging. All in all, Shadowlands is shaping up to be a great expansion. In the original version of the script, I talked about a few concerns that I still had at this point. The only minor worry I have pertains to soulbinds, and that is incredibly minor compared to all the good news that we've gotten. I'm so overwhelmed with happiness thanks to these changes, and I can't wait to finally be able to jump into Shadowlands. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think of Shadowlands in a comment down below. It really helps out. If you want to join my community and talk to me in person, join my Discord, and if you just want to hear from me more often, follow me on Twitter. And if you really like what I do, consider supporting me on Patreon. I have some pretty big projects in the works that patrons will be getting early access to. And an extra special thanks to Jitters and Grace. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.